Chapter 5. 3 days later, at dawn, V&H Helsing rode into Rome, a dark-cloaked figure on a black stallion. He made his way to the Vatican and past the great gates, riding hard across the enormous Piazza San Pietro, the tremendous open space in front of St. Peter's Basilica. He was surrounded by history again, by the past. The bells chimed as he passed the two great fountains and the two semicircular rows of columns that surrounded the large open space. The columns led to and seemed to guard the basilica as they had for centuries. St. Peter's was both the oldest and greatest church in all of Christendom. One of Jesus Christ's apostles, St. Peter, had suffered Christ's fate on earth and was crucified, though he had insisted on an inverted cross in his humility. According to church law, the great basilica was built on the site of Peter's burial, on his very blood. Van Helsing always felt a moment of reverence whenever he approached the church. There was the weight of the centuries the structure had endured, the sheer size and beauty of the place, and something else, a sense that one of the largest buildings in the world stood for something even greater than itself. Reaching the stairs in the front of the church, Van Helsing drew his horse to a halt and dismounted, handing the reins to the man who waited for him. Then he stepped into the church and strode across the marble floor. The light inside the building came from the cloisters, the upper portion of the outer walls that held the stained glass windows. It was warm, colorful, meant to give worshippers a sense of the wonder of creation and of peace. At the moment, Van Helsing felt neither. The church was built in the shape of a cross, at the center of which was the great dome created by Michelangelo himself. The structure was more than 700 feet deep, and it took Van Helsing some time to reach his destination. As he walked, he heard the chanting of monks. In the past, the Gregorian chants had quieted his mind, and he had found rare moments of peace inside this building. However, this time the sounds grated on his ears, and the very structure seemed to judge him and find him wanting. Van Helsing reached an ornate confessional and stepped inside. Falling to one knee, he said, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." He gritted his teeth and steeled himself for what would come next. A tiny partition door slid down in front of him, and he could see a figure behind the wooden mesh there. The voice that spoke to him was angry, indignant, and disappointed, a tone that was unique to Cardinal Ginette. "You shattered the rose window." "Not to split hairs, sir, but it was Mr. Hyde that did the shattering." Ignoring him, the cardinal continued to rant, "Built in the 13th century, over 600 years old. I wish you're weak in hell for that." "It would be a nice reprieve," Van Helsing replied, his voice defiant. "Don't get me wrong. Your results are unquestionable, but your methods draw far too much attention. Wanted posters? We are not pleased." The cardinal was now merely exasperated. Van Helsing felt his own frustration rising. "You think I like being the most wanted man in Europe? Why don't you and the order do something about it?" The cardinal leaned in and lowered his voice. "You know why, because we do not exist." "Then neither do I." He rarely won an argument with the cardinal, and though this was a small point, it felt like a great victory. Van Helsing got to his feet and turned to go when he heard a click from the cardinal's side. Immediately, bolts on his door slid into place. His Eminence moved closer, his voice tight and deadly serious. "When we found you crawling up the steps of this church, bloodied and half dead, it was clear to all of us that you had been sent to do God's work." "Why can't he do it himself?" Van Helsing shot back. "Don't blaspheme. You already lost your memory as a penance for past sins." There was a second click as the cardinal pulled another lever. A series of gears started working and the back walls of both confessional booths slid away, revealing a secret staircase. "If you wish to recover it, I suggest you continue to heed the call." Van Helsing sighed. As also often happened during these encounters with the cardinal, he had won a small victory but lost the war. The two men walked down the stairs in silence, and a few seconds later they entered the underground armory beneath the confessional. It was enormous, but still only a small part of the subterranean universe that was hidden under the great basilica. The armory was, as usual, bustling with action, with the steam of the blast furnaces filling the air. Van Helsing could feel the heat of the fires, which felt to him like the flames of God's own wrath. He noted the Jewish rabbis working the billows and Hindu priests stoking the fires as Muslim imams hammered red-hot scimitars on anvils. There was a war going on. A few days before, Van Helsing had been on the front line. Now he was back at headquarters, awaiting his orders. As they walked, Cardinal Jeanette intoned the familiar lecture. Governments and empires come and go, but we have kept mankind safe since time immemorial. We are the last defense against evil, an evil that the rest of mankind has no idea even exists. Van Helsing knew this speech by heart, having heard it often. The cardinal had the need to repeat it from time to time, and, Van Helsing had to admit, there were times when he needed to hear it. Evil did exist. He had seen too much in the last 7 years to deny it. In that time, he had studied, fought, and defeated it. Jeanette spoke the truth, but there were things he did not say and perhaps he could not understand, that in Van Helsing's work, victory came at a price. A war was being waged and the cardinal was a general who couldn't understand the cost paid by his foot soldiers. To you, these monsters are evil beings to be vanquished, Van Helsing observed, but I'm the one left standing there when they die and become the men they were. Jeanette was quiet for a moment. When he finally spoke, his tone was gentle. For you, my good son, this is all a test of faith. That is why you have no idea of who you are or where you come from. Van Helsing looked closely at the cardinal, waiting for something in answer, perhaps. Say you met God, and he set you on a task, the cardinal continued. You would have no fear because you would know that God was with you. But if your memory of meeting God were lost, then every day would be a test of faith. Not an answer, exactly, at least, not the kind that Van Helsing was looking for. How much did the cardinal know about his past, his identity? More than he would say today, that much was certain. But the cardinal was right, his faith was being tested. Somehow he hoped that knowing his past would make it easier for him to bear the terrible price of his work, or perhaps leave it behind. A weariness descended on him and weighed on more than his body. The cardinal snapped his fingers and the light around them dimmed. One of the clerics activated a slide projector. He clicked the machine and the images changed, showing the way from Rome to lands in Eastern Europe. Van Helsing knew what was coming. The cardinal was about to ask something of him. It would be too much, as usual, but he would expect Van Helsing to do it anyway. This time he might give the cardinal a surprise. We need you to go to the east, to the far side of Romania, an accursed land terrorized by all sorts of nightmarish creatures. Van Helsing knew the region. He had heard of what lurked in Romania's Carpathian Mountains, in the region known as Transylvania. An image of a man born of Eastern European royalty came up on the screen. The face was handsome, but there was something wrong with his eyes, Van Helsing noted. They were ice cold. How is your Romanian? The cardinal asked. Uncertainty must have showed on Van Helsing's face, because the cardinal asked, You do speak Romanian? Van Helsing thought about it for a moment. Yes. Good. The land is lorded over by a certain Count Dracula. Van Helsing found that he was suddenly alert and studying the image with interest. He had heard of Dracula, of course, but he also had the strangest sense that he was seeing someone he knew. The next picture was a painting of a nobleman from perhaps the 15th century. The man looked resolute, wearing a suit of armor covered in the sign of the cross. A name appeared on the bottom of the image, Valerius the Elder. 450 years ago, a Transylvanian knight named Valerius the Elder promised God that his family would never rest, not enter heaven, until they vanquished Dracula from their land. They have not succeeded, and they are running out of family. More grainy images of family members appeared on the screen. There was a burly, robust-looking older man who looked like a king. There was the handsome face of a young man. Boris Valerius, king of the gypsies. He went missing almost a year ago. His son Vulcan died just last week. The image of a girl dressed all in black and seated on a horse replaced the young man. She was perhaps 20 and looked very beautiful, and very dangerous. She had long, dark hair that fell in rings halfway down her back. Though she was wearing tight black riding clothes, she had the look of someone who had seen battle. Her eyes were striking, piercing, and framed by thin, rounded eyebrows. There was something wild about this woman, something in those eyes. Perhaps it was the gypsy blood. And the girl? Van Helsing asked. Princess Anna, the last of the Valerius, the cardinal said pointedly. If she is killed, 9 generations of her family will never enter the gates of St. Peter. Suddenly the room flooded with light and the cardinal was facing Van Helsing. For more than 4 centuries this family has held down our left flank. They gave up their lives, we cannot let them slip into purgatory. So you're sending me into hell? In a manner, Cardinal Jeanette said simply. An old cleric stepped up and handed something to the cardinal, who held it up for Van Helsing. It was a torn piece of painted cloth encased in a strip of glass. The whole thing fit easily in the palm of his hand. The old knight left this here 400 years ago. We don't know its purpose, but he would not have left it lightly. Van Helsing studied the piece. Painted on part of the cloth was an inscription. It was in Latin, Dum laces at ac nomen vita perire, which the cardinal translated aloud, in the name of God, open this door. And then Van Helsing saw something that surprised him. In the corner of the cloth, there was the insignia of a dragon. He had not only seen it before, but the ring on his finger bore the Sami symbol, just as it had when the cardinal's men had first found him. The cardinal witnessed the struggle that was playing out on Van Helsing's face and set a hand upon his special agent's arm in a fatherly gesture. I think that in Transylvania you may find the answer you seek. That was it. This time the cardinal's request came with an offer he knew Van Helsing would not refuse. One of these days he might find a way to say no to this man, but he knew it wouldn't be today. A sense of urgency filled him, and he headed across the armory and straight through a large blast of steam. A figure rushed up, Carl's brown robes were shaking as he ran. "There you are. Did you bring him back? Or did you kill him?" Van Helsing didn't respond. "You killed him, didn't you? That's why they get so annoyed. When they ask you to bring someone back, they don't mean as a corpse." Van Helsing scowled and turned to Cal, who gave him only a small smile. "All right," he retreated. "You're in a mood. Well, come on, I've got a few things that will put the bit back in your mouth." Again, Van Helsing found his interest rising. There was no denying that Carl was able to create things that were years ahead of the best weaponsmiths of his time. Behind the friar Van Helsing noticed swords coming out of the flaming forge. Then again, sometimes the old, direct ways and arms were the best. Carl was loud and indignant when he said, "Any idiot can make a sword." As if on cue, the large, beefy man wearing the robes of a Buddhist monk angrily stepped out from behind the forge, staring steel-eyed daggers at the friar. "Sorry, father." Carl quickly led Van Helsing to a shelf. He grabbed some things and stuffed them into Van Helsing's arms, saying, "Rings of garlic, holy water, a wooden stake, a silver crucifix." Loud reports thundered over the din of the armory. Van Helsing turned and saw a large multi-barreled firearm mounted on the floor. He had heard of this, the invention of a clever American named Gatling. The revolving rifle rapidly fired shot after shot, and Van Helsing saw he was looking into a window with a direct view of the future. He might also be seeing something he could use. "Why can't I take one of those?" Carl shot him an appraising look, staring at him as if he were a particularly dull child. It was a look that seemed to be the specialty of religious men. "You've never gone after vampires before, have you?" Van Helsing shrugged. "Vampires, gargoyles, warlocks, they're all the same, best when cooked well. They are not all the same. A vampire is nothing like a warlock. My granny could kill a warlock. Cal, you've never been out of the Abbey. How do you know about vampires? There it was, that look again. That's why they make books. Of course, and the Vatican had without a doubt the largest library in the world. A small portion of that collection was on nearby shelves. Van Helsing saw volumes by Socrates, Copernicus, Da Vinci, and Galileo. Some of the greatest works written by the most brilliant thinkers in the history of man. And next to them were sticks of dynamite that seemed to be dripping sweat into vials. Carl saw where he was looking and said, "Here's something new. Glycerin 48. He stuck his pinky into one of the vials and flicked a drop of the dynamite sweat against a wall, which instantly burst into a large ball of flame. Several of the startled men around them yelled in unison, "Knock it off, Carl." Sheepish, Carl said, "Sorry. Sorry." Then turned back to Van Helsing. "The air around here is thick with envy." In a casual movement that covered his obvious pride, Carl grabbed a strange-looking crossbow and handed it to Van Helsing. It was covered with iron pumps and copper tubes. "This is my latest invention." Carl was clearly pleased with himself. Van Helsing could see why. The weapon looked extremely effective. "Now, this I like. Gas-propelled, capable of catapulting bolts in rapid succession at tremendous velocity. Just pull the trigger and hold on," Carl said. Van Helsing studied the weapon with an appraising eye. Carl never exaggerated the value of his own creations. He didn't have to. Van Helsing adjusted the optical sight as Carl continued, "I've heard stories coming out of Transylvania. Trust me, you'll need this. A work of verifiable genius." Van Helsing gave him a tight smile. "If you don't say so yourself." After spending almost his whole life in the Vatican, among other religious men, Carl was immune to sarcasm and said plainly, "I did say so myself." Then he added without a hint of irony or humor, "I am a veritable cornucopia of talent." Another contraption that Van Helsing had never seen before caught his eye, and he picked it up. "Did you invent this?" Carl nodded. "I've been working on it for 12 years. It's compressed magma from Mount Vesuvius with pure alkali from the Gobi Desert. It's one of a kind." That sounded impressive. "What's it for?" "I have no idea, but I'm sure it will come in handy," Carl replied seriously, and started walking. Van Helsing followed. 12 years and you don't know what it does? Even for Carl, that was eccentric. "I didn't say that. I said I don't know what it's for. What it does is create a light equal to the intensity of the sun." "And this will come in handy how?" Carl picked up 2 heavy cloth bags and handed them to Van Helsing. "I don't know. You could blind your enemies. Charbroil a herd of charging wildebeest. Use your imagination." Typical, Van Helsing thought. Like most of the people at the headquarters of this war, Carl had no idea of what it was actually like in the field. And while Carl was brilliant, he had absolutely no idea of what life was like outside the Vatican. Well, it might be time to change all that. And if he was going after Dracula, Van Helsing knew he might need a little brilliance. "No, Cal, I'm going to use your imagination." "How's your Romanian?" Confused, the friar shrugged and said, "Excellent, I think. I've never actually spoken it to a Romanian." "That's why they make books," Van Helsing said. Carl nodded, squinting at Van Helsing, who added, "You're coming with me." "The hell be damned if I am." Van Helsing pointed with an accusing finger. "You cursed. Not very well, but you're a monk. You're not supposed to curse at all." "Actually, I'm still just a friar. I can curse all I want. Damn it. The cardinal has ordered you to keep me alive." Van Helsing shoved the 2 cloth bags back into Carl's arms, "for as long as possible." With that, the Vatican's special agent headed through the forges that flamed and burned all around him. "I may be going into hell, but for once I'm not going alone." Behind him, Carl's protest rang out, but I'm not a field man. Alara flew and dove between two mountain peaks. Mariska and Verona followed her. It took an effort for the other two brides to keep up. They were not as skilled in this or other, more important areas, such as pleasing their lord and master, Dracula. In that arena Alara also knew she was more capable. Still, the master had appetites that no one bride could quench, although Alara often felt that she would like to try. And more importantly, for now, the master's plan required the three of them. Once Dracula's dream was realized, well, anything was possible. Flight was one of the few things besides serving Dracula that still gave Alara pleasure. She liked the feeling of the air racing around her wings and the powerful body that was one of Dracula's greatest gifts to his brides. She also enjoyed looking at the living scurry around, knowing that she could have any one of them she wished at any time. In those moments, she knew what it must be like to be Dracula himself, with power over all who walked the earth. She spied the village of Vazeria nestled in its valley and wished she could fly over the living there to let them see her. She needed to feed on their blood, but she also took advantage of their intoxicating fear. That sated another kind of hunger, one that was not as urgent as her lust for blood, but just as real. Above the village square, Alara chose a rooftop and brought herself to a halt above it. She took her human form as she landed, and saw Mariska and Verona doing the same next to her, their white wings transforming into white gowns. "I am very, very excited about this," Alara said, though she knew there was danger here, however slight. She preferred Bray that looked at her in mute terror to that which fought back. No matter. These humans had no power to do her real harm. "Why can't we just let the werewolf kill her?" Mariska asked. Typical, lazy and cowardly, Alara thought. Verona gave Mariska a condescending look. Never trust a man to do a woman's job.
I'm glad you enjoyed the video. Before we close the video, I noticed 53% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!